Good morning, everybody. It is Saturday in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. My name is Adam Bittner, assistant sports editor for multimedia at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, joined by Jason Mackey, our Post-Gazette sports columnist. After day 2 of the NFL draft, we're going to recap the Steelers' action, some of the more noteworthy things from around the division in the NFL. Jason Kaleb Johnson is the pick for the Steelers at 83 overall. We spent a good deal of time talking about it on our Steelers NFL draft live stream last night at Mike's Beer Bar on the North Shore. Listen, I think that this is another pick that you can either like or you can find some things to quibble with. We spent a lot of time talking last night about the depth of this running back class. In the end, they go with the guy who is at the top of the board for much of the night rather than try to dip in at the position on day 3. Was that the right move from a value perspective? Is the answer possibly heck yes, considering how long he was the top running back on the board after Quinshon Judkins and Travion Henderson got taken early in day 2?
Yeah, I don't have any problem with the pick, Adam. I don't. I understand the argument for maybe to go another direction. We were talking last night about cornerback, and I mean that's going to address a position of need, yes, but you know what? The more I dig into Kaleb Johnson, the more I see him run, man, there's just a lot that Steelers fans are going to like. He's not afraid of contact. He's got the body to back it up. He obviously has, played in a legitimate conference and has succeeded in it. It's an offensive style that really fits the Steelers. So, yes, I understand it. You're never going to check every box. We sit here and we're going to, spin it ahead to day 3, and I'd still like to see them take a corner or a quarter back and a corner back. We'll probably get tripped up over those. But you know what? Body type, attitude, pedigree. I don't know. There's a lot to like about Kaleb Johnson, and I refuse to get upset over it. They needed a running back in this spot. I hope at some point he can become a 3-down back. I think that he can. They didn't overdraft him, so I'm good with it.
The thing I've seen, especially on social media, is how good he is, specifically as a zone runner. The Steelers love their zone runs under Arthur Smith. It felt like it was a schematic fit as much as anything else. We talk about these guys as athletes oftentimes at the running back position. But was this maybe simply a matter of Kaleb Johnson specifically was good at the things the Steelers want to do specifically?
Yeah, so I don't think – there could have been guys who weren't as good in zone concepts that would have made sense for the Steelers, certainly. I am curious, like going back and listening to Arthur Smith talk last night, you don't get a ton of emotion all the time out of Arthur Smith, but boy, if you're kind of reading between the lines or reading body language or intonation, however you want to phrase it, seems like this is somebody he really likes and can maneuver with. And, I think last year it made me think about this. If you look at the comparison between Najee Harris and Jaylen Warren, Jaylen Warren is a more natural fit in Arthur Smith's offense. Najee Harris is not. And it was, the old adage of pounding a square peg into a round hole. And I think Kaleb Johnson fits much more with the Jaylen Warren style, I think, because of some of those zone schemes. And I think Arthur Smith is probably excited because it's giving him a running back that is going to fit what he's trying to do more than the guy he had. So, I don't think it's absolutely essential, but I don't think it hurts.
I know Dylan Sampson of Tennessee was a guy you really liked, specifically from a home run ability standpoint. He is one of the top running backs beyond Kaleb Johnson who was available, averaged over 7 yards a carry for the Volunteers in the SEC, so against, the best competition there is. How did you feel specifically about Johnson being picked over Sampson, considering that he was a guy you liked?
Yeah, I liked Sampson a lot. And what we were looking for out of these backs, Adam, and I think this is ultimately what the Steelers needed to add into their offense and did, is that home run ability. And Dylan Sampson, I think, maybe has that more on paper, averaged over 7 yards a carry at Tennessee and has that breakaway speed. You know what? Seeing more Kaleb Johnson last night and some clips that were circulating, kid can get moving pretty good too. It's college competition versus pro, but I like their difference in body types. Dylan Sampson, 5'10", 201, Kaleb Johnson, 6 foot 225 or 6'1", 225. I don't want to shortchange him that inch, but I like the physicality that the Steelers got. I think in their division, their style of play, what Mike Tomlin's looking to do, even Arthur Smith for that matter. I think it matters. That being said, like, I wouldn't be upset if they got Bhayshul Tuten or something like that. I mean, he was another guy I was very high on, but I like Kaleb Johnson's style of running, and I don't think he's not a plodding back by any stretch. Like, what I'm saying, he can move. And so, yeah, I think they still took care of what they needed to with adding a playmaker.
He averaged 6.4 yards a carry for an offense. Yeah, for an offense that's going into a lot of stacked boxes because of who they are in Iowa. That's just their identity is pounding the football. And so for you to average over 6, I think is still very solid against the competition the Hawkeyes faced. Jason, we brought up Najee Harris, and that is more or less the style that Kaleb Johnson is being looked to replace. Chris Carter actually listed Najee Harris as a high comp for Kaleb Johnson, but thinks he's got a little bit more Le'Veon Bell-like patience. Given that, the explosiveness never really materialized with Najee Harris, do you have more hope that maybe Kaleb Johnson has a few more tools in his bag to get, I'm not going to say he's going to be scoring 75-yard touchdowns like Saquon Barkley all the time, but, doing something between, I think the comparison we used is he can hit more doubles and triples than Najee Harris did. That's what we said on the stream last night. What's your opinion on that notion?
Yeah, I mean, doubles and triples, they work. String a few together, you're going to score some runs, man. That's an analogy I know and I like. Here's where I'm at on that. We don't know. We can't pretend to know. And I think the only way we're going to find out is once Kaleb Johnson gets into Arthur Smith's system and we see how it works. And here's why I say that. Like, Najee Harris coming out of Alabama was somebody you thought would have breakaway speed and could that wasn't his calling card, but it wasn't a weakness. He broke long runs at Alabama. He didn't look like there was going to be a problem there.
We were making Derrick Henry comparisons at that time.
Yeah. And it just hasn't materialized. So does he fit? I don't know. Is Kaleb Johnson going to turn into Najee Harris when he gets that pitch that they're going to try to force feed him? Or is it going to be more of a Jaylen Warren straight ahead style? I think it's going to be the latter, but we don't know until he actually gets into the offense. I do know this, and this is similar to Najee. There's a lot of physical tools. I like the way Najee ran by and large. I don't think a Najee Harris comparison for Kaleb Johnson is a bad thing. I want a running back in here who's physical and who wants contact and that sort of thing. But, that X factor that never really took Najee's career in Pittsburgh to the next level. Again, we're talking about a guy who's played every single game, Adam, ran for 1,000 or more yards every single season. His tenure here was not a failure, but the criticism is that breakaway speed that for whatever reason didn't translate. So I would hope and think certainly possible that it happens for Kaleb Johnson, but we're not going to know until we get into games and actual competition.
Well, a relevant stat Chris Carter brought up was that Kaleb Johnson averages 3.9 yards per carry after contact, or at least close to that, which is roughly what Najee Harris's average was in general with the Steelers. So you hope that there is a little bit more after contact than there was with Najee Harris. Let me ask you about the handling of Najee Harris in hindsight now that this backfield is seemingly complete with Kaleb Johnson, Jaylen Warren, and Kenneth Gainwell. Spent a lot of time on the stream last night talking about the decision not to give that fifth-year option to Najee, which would have been something like $5-6 million, and then the decision not to give him an extension. I look at the decision you made to go out and get Kaleb Johnson and say you're saving money that you can now apply in 2026, 2027, 2028. If Jaylen Warren moves on in unrestricted free agency this season, running back's a position you're not going to have to spend that money on. You can reallocate it elsewhere. Is that the simple win here for Omar Khan on the team building side?
Well, not only that, Adam, and I agree with you. Also think about what they added in terms of depth. But this past season, the Steelers had a substitute teacher carrying the ball. Like, that's how thin they were. That's a problem. And so I think what Omar Khan did was move some money around. I think he certainly saved some money, but he gave the Steelers additional depth at that position. I don't want anything to happen to Jaylen Warren, Kenneth Gainwell, or Kaleb Johnson, but if something does, they're far better insulated against it this year. You're also insulated against needing Kaleb Johnson to step in and perform right away. I think that was one thing with Najee Harris. Granted, he was a first-round pick, but Kaleb Johnson can sort of work his way into this thing as it suits. We can find what he does well and use that to complement Jaylen Warren and Kenneth Gainwell. I think Arthur Smith talked about that a little bit last night. But yes, I mean, you save money, you save a little bit of money, you get more depth, and you get younger at the position, at least with Kaleb Johnson. So there's a lot that Omar Khan and the Steelers did this offseason with this room. Full marks for how they've handled running back. The Steelers have taken a lot of criticism for how they've handled the quarterback position, including from yours truly, but they've handled wide receiver, they've handled running back very well this offseason so far.
Last question on the running back front, Jason. Something that stood out about Kaleb Johnson is that he does not have a ton of tread on the tire. I think he had 240 attempts for Iowa last season, never had more than 200 in a season before that. So he's not a guy that's coming in that was carrying the ball 30 times a game. And some of these college running backs do, kind of have their wheels run off before they even get to the pros, and that limits their shelf life. And he's coming into a situation with Jaylen Warren and Kenneth Gainwell where you figure he's not going to be taking a ton of carries early in his NFL career. Is that another argument for this pick of this is a guy you can have fresh for a long time in addition to, all the other things he brings to the table?
Sure. I mean, if Ashton Genty would have fallen to them, I wouldn't have had any problem if they took them, but it's a unintended positive or something like that. And I will say this is sort of contradicting myself, but we're talking about Kaleb Johnson's running style. I mean, that's not free. That's going to take some residual effects on him. So yes, I think it's very good. What my biggest take as far as this stuff, Adam, is just, I love the fact that Kaleb Johnson doesn't have to be the guy. He might be the guy. He might earn the opportunity to be the guy. He might be the best available option, but let him show me that. Don't force that. Don't make this kid have to adjust his running style or how he, understands or anything like that. Let it happen organically. That's what Jaylen Warren and Kenneth Gainwell are there for. They can take care of that, and I think they're going to be a fine fit. But Kaleb Johnson can come along at his own pace. I love that.
Big trade-off here, Jason, obviously, is choosing not to go with Shedeur Sanders on day 2 of the draft. Listen, there's a lot of discourse about him nationally, and I don't think we have the time to get into that and that whole conversation. But simply from a Steelers perspective, how did you feel about them choosing Kaleb Johnson over Shedeur Sanders, given that Shedeur Sanders is significantly higher on a lot of people's boards? Obviously went into the draft is seen as a day 1 pick, maybe an early day 2 pick. Now we're into the 3rd day, and he still hasn't been chosen. Is that the Steelers reading the room correctly, where maybe many people on the outside did not? Or do you think that we're going to look back and say they potentially missed an opportunity to get a solid prospect very late in the draft?
I want to break into Frozen's Let It Go, and reference one of my kids' favorite movies, but I won't do that to everybody watching. We need to let it go with Shedeur. The Steelers made a pick to improve their team in the best way possible. And I know we're talking about this from the Steelers' perspective, and we don't have time to go into why Shedeur has fallen, although I think you're seeing, NFL teams not want to deal with the fallout, not want to deal with the fuss. His talent's not worth what could be happening on the back end of that. But, as far as what the Steelers are doing and how this applies, they can still take a quarterback. There are guys that they might have, I'd be curious what they have Will Howard graded as, compared to Shedeur Sanders. I am much more enticed by grabbing Will Howard in the 4th round and winding up with Kaleb Johnson the way they did in the 3rd. I've largely liked what the Steelers have done in the draft. The Derek Harmon pick was very good. They're addressing needs. I don't think it's any more complicated than that, Adam. I mean, yes, it's a storyline. Yes, I guess you feel bad for Shedeur. I don't really care. It's the Steelers' job to put the best team on the field possible. And right now, like whether we agree or disagree, the best option that they have for 2025 is Aaron Rodgers agreeing to play for them. If they draft Shedeur, I think that probably sends the wrong message to Aaron Rodgers. It's also a fail in team building. Aaron Rodgers is best served by having somebody who can help stop the run and get his offense back on the field. So I think that's the way they're operating.
Well, something Brian Backo pointed out on the stream last night, Jason, was that if you bring Shedeur in here, there's a good chance he's inactive for a good chunk of 2025 because you would have Aaron Rodgers under contract, and then you'd have Mason Rudolph as a number 2 that you're paying somewhat handsomely. So are you really gonna sign up for the circus that follows Shedeur Sanders to have him inactive most weeks. You're going to be on the national shows. First Take, all those FS1 debate shows where they talk about the stuff are going to go to that well with Shedeur all the time. And that's not necessarily a reason not to do it, because outside noise should not influence you that much. But there would be a lot of outside noise with this pick when you had other needs to address.
Yeah, and you can get some of that. Like, look, they want some potential on this third day of the draft, right? Completely understand. What's wrong with Kyle McCord? What's wrong with Will Howard? What's wrong with a couple other guys that, hey, they might amount to something. They might not. It's a 4th round, 5th round, 6th round pick, whatever it may be. But they're not going to have, the fuss, the attention, potentially, what's the word I'm looking for? Discontent or something, from the Sanders camp. You're not going to have to deal with that. Like, again, the juice just isn't worth the squeeze at this point. I'm sure somebody will take him. Somebody will view him as a project that maybe he works out. There's value there. If I'm the Steelers, I don't want it. I don't want it. I've got all the drama and the fuss that I can handle or want to handle in my building. Aaron Rodgers is not without some of it, just by nature of who he is. I've got enough to worry about with George Pickens. I've got enough to worry about with Mike Tomlin and getting this organization to take an important step forward. I don't need to be messing around with the third-string quarterback.
I'll say this before I get you out of here with a question about Jalen Milroe. I also don't blame Shedeur Sanders for the circus. I think it is our business and people in our business who have made that a feeding frenzy, just with the Colorado program in general. So a lot of that is not Shedeur Sanders' fault. I think it is our business's fault. And people got to be, there needs to be more circumspection about this from our business and how we handle things. So
but why, Adam? Why? What do you mean circumspection?
There were times where, how many weeks in a row where they put Colorado as the national game when the program itself wasn't worthy of that label, and that fed into people's perception of quarterbacks in college football.
Okay,
and so it built him up clearly to a degree that NFL teams never thought he was worthy of.
Yeah, but he's out there, and this is a unique dog and pony show presented by the Sanders family, and the media is doing its job. Like, yeah, does ESPN go over the top of this? Absolutely. Absolutely. But I mean, it's a dog chasing its tail or something like that. You know what I mean? Like, if this was a boring story, if the Sanders family was not the way it was, if the Sanders family was just, average run-of-the-mill football family, the media would not be reacting this way. It's reacting this way because there's a spark. And of course we chase things that are interesting, that are a spark, that are going to get attention, whatever. And so that's why they're propping it up. And it's just one is sort of playing off the other. I mean, here, I was kind of smiling or saying that I disagree with your point. And I do disagree with your point to a degree. Shedeur Sanders is in charge of his career. If he doesn't want this to be a thing, you go out and stomp it out. You tell your dad, shut up. You're not going to talk about me. I'm going to be out in front of my own narrative, but I'm not going to be showing up on ESPN's First Take and all these various shows and, putting myself out there. I'm going to show that I'm going to show my future employee, look, there's a time and place for that. It's after I establish myself. Once I get into the league and I become a star, maybe I can act a certain way. Right now it's head down. I'm going to focus on my craft, that sort of thing. And that's not what he's doing. And I think that rubs teams the wrong way. That's not a media creation. That's a this day and age society creation where it's me, social media, NIL. Look at what a star I can become. That's not the media's fault. If he wants to put a stop to that sort of crap, he can. He doesn't want to because he's a Sanders and he'd rather have the attention. But this is part of the byproduct of it.
Jason, I do want to get into Jalen Milroe because he was the other quarterback the Steelers passed on last night to take Kaleb Johnson. He ends up going, a couple picks later to the Seattle Seahawks. Talked about as a higher upside type of guy than some of the other quarterbacks in this class. Any regrets there, or is it a similar story where you're saying he's going to be inactive too? And he's going to be more inactive maybe than Shedeur Sanders would be and further from playing for a year, and you have a chance to make your team better now and in the immediate future, beyond 2025, and you've just got to take that chance over bringing in a project type quarterback.
Yeah, Adam, this fits under the umbrella for me of the I'm not going to do something to tick off Aaron Rodgers camp. That's sort of like not taking Shedeur Sanders, and not that the organization should be catering to Aaron Rodgers, but I don't see that working out. And if their eggs are all in the Rodgers basket, it doesn't make any sense to me to take Milroe. I would rather, again, as I've been saying, fix the defense, the area up front where you lack depth. You need to be able to stop the run, etc. They needed a running back. You need to have an established running game with a 41, 42-year-old quarterback. You take Kaleb Johnson, you address that need. So Jalen Milroe, I like him as a gadget guy. We were talking on the live stream last night, could wind up going somewhere where maybe the offensive coordinator gets a little creative with them. I'll say it that way. Weird situation for Sam Darnold to come in there. It gave me like Kirk Cousins vibes, but either way, you can make some use of Jalen Milroe and what he does well. It's intriguing for Seattle, but I wouldn't want that here. I don't think it's what the Steelers should be efforting toward.
Jason, any final thoughts as we head into day 3 here?
Very curious to see the route the Steelers go and how they play the quarterback card. I'd like to see them get a wide receiver and add some depth there. I think that's something they need to get to before too long. So, I mean, where they come out in the 4th round, based on what Art Rooney said last night too, wouldn't surprise me if they went quarterback right off the hop. But I think you got to get a wide receiver, got to get a quarterback, got to get a corner back. And then maybe that 4th pick is a bit of a wild card. I don't know. Maybe that becomes an edge rusher you take a chance on, or an offensive lineman, maybe an Isaac Seumalo successor or something like that. But yeah, the right out of the chute in the quarterback wide receiver dynamic is probably what intrigues me the most.
Well, Jason, thank you for your time. Everyone else, subscribe to the channel. Christopher Carter and I will be back after the day 3 picks to recap them and our feelings about them, talking about where Shedeur Sanders ultimately ends up. So we're still early today. We still got a lot of football to talk about. Looking forward to it. I want to thank Jason. I want to thank Mike's Beer Bar for hosting our live stream last night. If you haven't already, check that out. Lots of analysis of the Kaleb Johnson pick, lots of analysis of everything that's going on around the NFL. So subscribe to the channel if you enjoyed this video. Pop a like on it. Help us out in the YouTube algorithm, and we will talk to you in a little bit.
Thank you for checking out this content from Post-Gazette Sports. If you watch this video on YouTube, please like the video and subscribe to our channel. For all of the sports coverage the Post-Gazette has to offer, visit post-gazette.com.